episode about detritus, Richard invoked your name, Mr. Craig.
I could feel my ears burn when
they were burning because is my second thing, which is I've always seen gone back and forth with on the hobbyist level, is people swearing up and down that their calcareous live rock or their calcareous substrate will like bind up and lock up phosphate, and that should you use it in another tank or whatever. I remember at one point that some hobbyists would make like a light muriatic acid solution and like bathe their dry live rock because they thought like the outer layer of the live rock would like burn off and release phosphate, and it sounded weird to me.
There is some phosphate that gets tied up in these carbonate. Some of the carbonates are formed that are basically pure carbonates, and they're made by coralline algae and corals and stuff like that. And then there's other kind of like mixed stuff, and it can be inorganic precipitate on bacterial biofilm and stuff like that, and that kind of stuff can contain all kinds of different mineral stuff, and there can be a bunch of phosphate in that. So there can be some. Now, whether or not rinsing your rock with muriatic acid is a wise move or not, I don't know. I think that you would have had to have abused that pretty badly.
Two things. First of all, fuck those mudblood carbonates, right? Those dirty carbonates. We want pure carbonate.
Mudblood.
When I first heard about the idea of using muriatic acid or acid bathing your rock, it didn't have anything to do with phosphates. It had to do with the idea of opening up the porosity of your rock. And that sounded a little nutty to me in the first as well. So I think it's funny how there's this original idea, and then it just gets stolen, and other stuff just keeps getting put onto it.
It's without like the phone game.
I think it all started when somebody like remembered from high school chemistry that if you put acid on limestone, it will fizz, right? And then it was off to the races after that.
So
I mean, does that necessarily mean, let's say you saw this tank over there, it was like an absolute train wreck, and the person's like, oh, I'm taking it down. It's like, oh, can I get the live rock? And you could just take the live rock out, put it in your driveway, just blast it for several days with, just high pressure tap water. And then would you be concerned to put that back into a reef tank? Like whatever ill will happened in that old tank was necessarily going to come back and plague you because of what was bound up in that old rock, even if you clean the hell out of it?
You broken Craig.
I broke Craig.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I can imagine scenarios where I wouldn't want to use rock from a system, like if copper had ever been used in it or something like that. I think that would make me a little bit leery about it. I think that good husbandry can probably overcome bad rock in a lot of cases. If your system is calcifying and is constantly just like laying down stuff over the top of whatever's there, I think that will tend to like bury the bad stuff on some level, but your system has to be happy and calcifying for that kind of encasement or whatever to really happen very much.
Seems like it could be a cop out for
rinsing the. It just seems like there could be. It's not necessarily a surface phenomenon because there is a certain amount of porosity in the rocks, so the bad stuff could be buried, at depth and slowly diffuse back out. If in fact there was this bad stuff there, exactly what it is, I'm not sure. I mean, if they're worried about phosphate, I don't think that I'd be tremendously concerned about that. Heavy metals, they medicated it, that could come back out, but
I
mean, honestly, as a business, that's why, like, and I don't know, I'm not saying it's a sure shot, but like I run like polyfilter, you know, that polybiomarine polyfilter. So
Yes.
like I usually run that just maybe as a catch-all, maybe that 2 little fishies metal absorber thing once in a while. I mean, sometimes I'll just employ stuff like that just because I'm thinking, you know, but I don't even know if it's necessarily working, but I put it there just to be sure.
Right.
I wish that we had better. I think that we could be doing better with dry rock or synthetic reef rock in terms of like getting it biologically active and maybe encrusted with some desirable animals before we give it to people. And if this rock, this driveway rock, had been through a process like that, then I'd feel a lot better about it, right? Well, it's got stuff growing on it.
I love that.
The bioassay is that coralline algae is thriving on this, and there's some other, encrusting organisms on there. So it looks like looks okay to me.
You just coined a new phrase, and I freaking love it. And I am right now going to ask your permission because from now on, I'm going to call it driveway rock.
I wrote it down.
Driveway rock.
When I get rock from somebody, I remember Jim Adelberg. He was in Tonga for a year or two, and he shipped me a bunch of live rock, and I stuck it in a tank under the house for 3 or 4 months in water with an air stone, and I did a water change on it every month or two, and just let it. That's where bacterial turgor comes from. That was the idea. Let the bacteria push all the goo out of the rock. That was one of the. I have no idea if that's actually anything, but that was probably not, because no one talks about it anymore.
I don't think that's a thing, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But that's what I would do with somebody else's rock, is I just let it. We used to call that cooking until somebody actually started cooking their rock, and then we realized we can't call it cooking anymore, even though cooking is way more fun. But even with I got some real reef rock in a box because I wanted to do some stuff with it, and I put it out in a tub just sitting in salt water for a month before I started using it. And that's whatever's in it that lets whatever alkalinity spikes that often comes from that push out. It lets some bacteria start to develop. It just seems like an easy thing to do.
Right. Yeah, I was in a pet store that was actually, I think I sent you a picture of it. I listened to your podcast about that.
Yeah.
And they had some man-made live rock, and they'd gone a little bit farther. They were actually feeding it ammonium chloride to get nitrification going in the rock, which I was fairly impressed with. It was actually a very nice pet store.
What's its name? If you want to,
it's in Milwaukee, and I can't remember what the name is off the top of my
head. Oh, swing and a miss.
Now, do you think adding ammonium chloride is a better idea than just adding fish food? It sounds all, and I ask that because it sounds all scientifical, but my dirty, lazy ass mind thinks if you add actual fish food, then you're growing all kinds of stuff, which, as I say it out loud, could be bad as well.
Well, right. So I think that some fish food would probably not be a bad idea. It's ultimately what it's going to have to process, right?
Yeah.
So if you're just adding ammonium chloride, there won't be any phosphate in the system. So the amount of biomass that you can actually form will be limited to whatever phosphorus is in the system to start out with. Now, if you're just looking for stuff to metabolize the ammonia and for energetic purposes, then you could use a lot of it without having very much phosphate around.
If I owned a fish store, I would have a big tub of rock, and I'd go to the store and get dead fish and put it in there. No, beef. I would throw beef in it.
Beef, steaks. Rotting steaks in your tank.
Live rock is really good at making dead fish disappear, right?
Right? That's why I think this whole detritus food breaking down, I think it happens so fast most of the time that it just don't use filter socks because it's breaking down. I'd like to see that.
I would put murdered customers that asked me dumb questions.
I would put influencers.
Oh my God. We're sort of in there.
We're like asshole influencers.
It's an influencer is still an influencer.
We're just influencing people that already agree with us.
Yeah.